All right, well, welcome to our second ever RIEEE seminar webinar series. We look forward to doing these monthly on a variety of topics and formats. And as always, you can let us know what you'd like to hear about. Today, we're really thrilled to be talking about a new NSF STC, which we are a part of. And we're joined first by Director of the STC, Dr. Jacob Jones. And so I'm going to take a minute to do an introduction, which I know those are sometimes embarrassing for people when they just have all their accomplishments read, but I think it's worth knowing what kind of leadership we get to work with and how exciting that is for our university and the students. So Dr. Jacob Jones is a distinguished professor of material science and engineering at NC State University. He is also director and principal investigator of the Science and Technologies for Phosphorus Sustainability, or STEPS Center, which we'll talk about today. And he's director and PI of the Research Triangle Nanotechnology Network, RTNN as well. He received his PhD from Purdue University and then did a postdoctoral fellowship in Sydney, Australia. And his research interests involve developing fundamental understanding of inorganic materials during their synthesis and use. And so he has a lot of microscopy experimental history, but really his research interests have kind of taken over the globe in terms of their scale, all of the different scales. And he has gotten into highly convergent areas, which we'll talk about. He's published over 269 papers on these topics, which is a lot. And he has all kinds of awards and honors, and he likes to play cheesy music at our center meetings and make everything really fun. So it's my pleasure to work with Jacob and to invite him to give us an overview of the center as a start.
Thank you, Christine. You're right, it's embarrassing. The favorite thing that I heard you say was that I like to play music, but you should have said good music. You just said music. I guess to each his or her own. I'm going to try to share my screen here. Christine told me that I have an hour and a half to talk. Is that right? Someone coughed. So now what I'm bringing to you today is, and I hope you're seeing the presentation at this point in time, but what I'm bringing to you today are about 15 slides, really to convey what STEPS is and a little bit about what we plan on doing and how much we value the Appalachian State contribution. And in fact, I was going to say this at the end, but I'm planning on visiting AppState in early December. So if we want to continue these discussions, then I think that would be wonderful. But thanks, Christine, for the opportunity to bring this to you virtually. This was an excuse for me to get out of a faculty meeting, so thank you very much. Walked straight out and straight down here to join you. So NC State is the lead institution of this new Science and Technology Center, but we have partners throughout the country that provide very valuable and necessary contributions to the center. Our largest partner is Arizona State, where they've had a cluster of activity over the past couple decades in phosphorus sustainability, and they have an industrial consortium, I would call it, called the Sustainable Phosphorus Alliance that contributes. So we were recently announced in September as one of 6 NSF Science and Technology Centers. So the STCs are very prestigious NSF centers. They're agency-wide. Engineering research centers are just in engineering. STCs are agency-wide. So they cover all topics of interest to the National Science Foundation, and they award on average about one every year. They come out in groups of every 5 years. So this time they found money to fund 6, but still, I mean, I tell the team this is like winning the Super Bowl because it's one on average every year. So we're very fortunate to have made it through the entire process. It started October 1st and today's the 22nd. So we've been a center for 22 days. I'm not going to share with you significant center results as a result of that, but just some idea of the things that we're working on. It's a significant amount of funding, but distributed over 9 institutions and 40 investigators. It goes very quickly, as you might imagine. So we're always looking for leveraging opportunities and to bring people in unique ways. We do have about 40 graduate research assistants and postdocs in the budget, some undergraduates during the academic year, and we have an REU program, Research Experience for Undergraduates program, that will kick off in summer of 2022. All right, so let's get my screen right here. Let me talk about phosphorus for a second. Y'all are in a unique area of North Carolina where I'm sure you already know about phosphorus, but maybe it's useful for us to tell you how we explain it to others. Maybe you could provide some feedback on how to explain it better. But usually what I say is that everything we eat needs phosphorus to grow. So without it, we're really up a creek. All living things need phosphorus. It's essential for animals, plants, and microbes. But the real problem is that society's use of phosphorus is unsustainable and it's harmful to humans and the environment. So we source it from non-renewable resources. This is a photograph of a mine in North Carolina, a phosphate mine. It's used in the food system as an essential nutrient, but it's also a pollutant, even in producing food for us to eat, even before we get downstream. Only 1/5 of it enters our diet, so 4/5 is lost. It's 80% is just lost. And it enters waterways, causing eutrophication, fish kills. This is a river right here in Raleigh, the Neuse River, where we frequently have eutrophication and fish kills. So the problem is only going to get worse, and STEPS is all about creating circularity in this somewhat linear looking cycle. And so we put forth an ambitious vision that we sold to NSF. We have a plan supporting this vision, but it is ambitious to facilitate a 25% reduction in human dependence on mined phosphates and a 25% reduction in losses of phosphorus to point and non-point sources, including soils and water within 25 years. So it's a 25-year vision. It's an initial 5-year award, expected renewal for another 5 years. So even NSF funding that carries us through 10 years isn't going to allow us to reach 25. So we have sustainability plans for post-NSF funding, but more importantly, we're trying to do breakthrough discovery research, basic science, that's going to take a long time to roll out. And so if we do the right things now, then we'll be able to have a 25-year impact. But that's a crazy thing to tell a student, because they're like, what am I going to work on? What's my project? And so we start funneling it down. Okay. And one thing that we did at the outset of this was said, where can we really make inroads that will make a difference? And there are some models out there that suggest both on the inputs and the output sides, where to focus energy to make the largest impact into the phosphorus cycle. And so we're focusing on these 4 main ambition areas: soil-bound phosphorus, often referred to as legacy phosphorus. It's mostly organic in nature. Surface waters, recovering it from dilute sources like surface waters, maybe more concentrated sources like animal manure, because this is a point source for phosphorus recovery. And then also human urine. We have at Arizona State a urinal lab that's very uncomfortable to tour if you're not in ag and bioengineering. But really some wonderful research going on out there, capturing phosphorus at the source before it's diluted and sent down the wastewater treatment plant. So STEPS approaches this by thinking about it in the following way. You know, and I'm a material scientist, so I'm the first one that sketched it out this way as far as link scale is concerned. Essentially inspired by nanotechnology, how we teach nanotechnology to students. But we have scientists working at the smallest link scales, you know, chemists and material scientists, biologists. And then we have scientists working at link scales at which humans interact with technology, which is here in the middle, colored green. Wastewater treatment plants, farms, fields, growers, folks like that. And then we have contributors working at the regional and global scale that are working on economics, macroeconomics, social science, and things like that. So these constitute, the 3 colors constitute our 3 major research themes, which are really allow the investigators in those themes to push forward good quality science without getting hung up on how to span all 3 of these research themes. So we're discovering and developing high ambition materials down here. We're implementing technologies and materials in surface waters and the plant soil microbial system. And we're doing systems level modeling and prioritization across economic, social, physical, and life sciences to guide the research. So there's fundamental science, important fundamental science that goes on here. There's important fundamental science that goes on here. And there's important fundamental science that goes on here. And as an exercise during proposal development, we asked investigators to self-identify with the discipline And we did not give them multiple choices. It was open response. And this is what they came back with, 28 unique ones. And you may argue that some of these 28 are very close. Like, is environmental science really that different than environmental engineering? Is material science really that different than chemical engineering? I mean, yeah, we're not getting into those arguments. All I'm saying is we got 28 unique responses. So it's broad. And if you pick out examples, you know, there's a chemist involved, there are biologists, material scientists, soil geochemists, economists, social scientists, limnologists. And it's fun to interact across all of these different disciplines, even in not just in research, but in how they write a proposal. And I'm kind of going off script here, but I mean, if you have ever written a proposal with a social scientist, you know they do it differently than a physical scientist. So it's been an interesting journey. Fortuitously, during our proposal development phase, NSF came out with their 10 big ideas, and one of them was growing convergence research. And so we latched onto this because we recognized that with all of these different perspectives involved, this is a convergence research center. And so NSF, this is what NSF said about it. The grand challenges of today, which now we know phosphorus is one of these grand challenges. Protecting human health is another. Understanding the food, energy, water nexus will not be solved by one discipline alone. They require convergence, which involves the merging of ideas, approaches, and technologies from widely diverse fields of knowledge to stimulate innovation and discovery. So we actually received in the review comments from NSF once, a reviewer said, STEPS is a convergence research center with phosphorus sustainability as the vehicle. And we picked it up and we ran with it. And so that's essentially what we are. So what we mean by a convergence research center is that we draw from the fields of science of team science, as well as integration and implementation science to inform how we go about doing business. We have a dedicated STEPS integration director, Christine Hendren, who's here on the call. And so she's responsible for all of this. She signed up for it. It's too late. STEPS utilizes convergence boundary objects as tangible or conceptual connection points. So you ask material scientists to get in a room with a limnologist and work on a problem. This is a nucleating point to starting a conversation. And so a representative one is shown over here, like phosphorus flow diagram. So my material science students can say, oh yeah, I'm working on this bit right here, capturing this bit. And if I can do that and influence in a positive way, then I'm going to influence the whole system in such a way. We're developing what we call convergence informatics, which integrates data across highly disparate disciplines. And we have stakeholder groups that help guide the research through IRB approved studies. So let me add one thing, which is we also have a tendency to analyze ourselves, and maybe all scientists do this. But as a center, we conducted a social network analysis of the projects to see how integrative they were. And the social network analysis map is shown over here, where every senior investigator is a node colored by their primary research theme. And then the density of the nodes reflects the number of connection points across 20 different research project proposals. So you can see clusters of activity here in the middle, which the social scientist that did this calls gravitational forces. So there are a few people here in the middle that are pulling the center together. But if everyone did that, we would get really tied up. And so we definitely need diffusion of contributions across this space. So just elaborating on this a little bit more, this convergence boundary object that I mentioned, the phosphorus flow diagram, you can look at this and really learn a lot about the system. The first thing to see in a flow diagram like this, and by the way, the arrows, the width of the arrows represent the relative magnitude of mass per year of phosphorus flows. So one thing to note here is that there's a mass imbalance. There's a big arrow coming into the agricultural system, and there's only a small arrow going out. And so that mass imbalance really contributes to the legacy phosphorus challenges. Over here, we have wastewater treatment plants that discharge significant amounts of phosphates into surface waters. And we also have loss of surface waters from agricultural lands, in many cases, diffuse sources. And this causes eutrophication and associated algal blooms and the images that I shared before. And then the most interesting thing I find about this is us. So humans are over here with a small arrow in and a small arrow out. So we're not doing much in terms of affecting phosphorus flows, but it's the decisions that we make which necessitate all of this infrastructure up here. So human behavior is part of what we're interested in understanding. One other way in which we collaborate is we use triple bottom line scenario sites as an additional intersection point between projects. So we decided early on in the proposal development process that we needed to make this more tangible for students. So looking at the entire US or the entire world and considering phosphorus flows is too intellectually challenging. If we take representative cases and address those, then we can map that to larger spaces. And so this triple bottom line scenario site allows us to do that. We created the idea of the TBL site when Christine and I and a couple others visited Arizona State in November of 2019. I took a photograph of it on the wall. So these are geographical footprints where we have well-defined inputs and outputs. There are system constraints. There's data available. There are stakeholder narratives involved in this. So the stakeholder narratives in the aquatic ecosystem in South Florida are quite rich in nature. And they contain real field test sites for new materials, processes, practices, plants, et cetera, and so on. This is an aerial photo taken at one of these TBL sites, the Tidewater Research Station, where we have a 50-year phosphorus experiment going on in these fields with drawdown and uptake of phosphorus. There's the urban ecosystem where we think about buildings and capturing phosphorus at point sources and wastewater treatment. And then in South Florida, we partnered with a few investigators that allow us to touch upon problems in the Everglades. And although I said problems, I mean, this is decades old, been tackled by a lot of different people. Government policy has influenced this, engineers have influenced this, and they really developed good control over the phosphorus outflows from Lake Okeechobee and reduced the amount of phosphorus inflows to the Everglades National Park. And so there's a lot we could learn from studying the history of what's going on in South Florida. And just to give you one example, because it's close to us, I think it's a 2-hour drive east of NC State. The Tidewater Research Station sits around over here. It's a 1,500-acre site. We plan on having annual meetings at these sites so students have real experiences in these spaces. This site is a collaboration between NC State and the NC Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. It's already funded and we're leveraging it. Like I said, it has this 50-year phosphorus fertilization experiment. And you can see a photograph over here of an area where they've applied no excess phosphorus in the fertilizer, and then they've applied a certain amount of phosphorus. It's also the location where I took this photograph I showed you earlier of a swine lagoon. So it touches upon that. I haven't talked a lot about the people. The people are amazing. And I suppose what I could say is that we all embrace shared values. So one would be sustainability, which means addressing the needs of the present without compromising needs of the future, considering the so-called triple bottom line factors of social, environmental, and economic. We embrace engagement of stakeholders and the public through formalized processes to guide our research priorities. I mentioned the stakeholder engagement program before. The convergence that I've emphasized so much, which enables synergies and collaborations through research, educating researchers to tackle convergence research problems and students and the public and phosphorus sustainability through what we call the convergence classroom, a space where we lower the bar to understanding complex things so we can develop common languages and speak across disciplines. And then diversity. We're aiming for over 50% participation by women and members of underrepresented groups, including over 50% pre-baccalaureate participation. And we have a large group of folks that are helping us with recruitment efforts in order to help achieve that, such that it reinforces the innovative nature of what the center can achieve. And then I only have a couple more slides. This one makes it maybe makes our intended products a little bit more tangible for you. So this provides an example of what we hope to have achieved in just 4 representative project areas in 10 years. So one is the accelerated discovery of new materials for removing phosphorus from waters, which surprisingly we don't have now. It's very ad hoc. It's very heuristic how people go about the types of experiments that they go about. So we're doing informatics to help inform that. New sensors to enable real-time tracking of phosphorus in soils and waters. And when I was learning about this problem several years ago, I talked to a sensor guy and I said, aren't there sensors available for this? And he goes, no, you gotta be kidding. So that is an important part of the center. Additives that address phosphorus fixation in soils and make soil-bound phosphorus bioavailable to plant roots. And then on the social science side, mapping technologies to potential implementation. So we have, this is effective human intervention portfolios that help guide our research directions and that are also resilient to socioeconomic policy and environmental change. And anyone that has lived through the pandemic over the last year and a half knows to expect socioeconomic policy and environmental change. And then over on the right-hand side, the students. So whether they're undergraduate students during the academic year or during the summer, if they're graduate students or postdocs, they're going to carry the torch forward, and they're going to be one of the most important things that the center develops. So these students will either work continuing on the phosphorus sustainability challenge, or since they're being trained in convergence research and how to work across disciplines, they could go out and solve another societal grand challenge. And that's what we hope to see. I don't know if I shared my sound, so I'll tell you what, I'm going to stop sharing for just a second. And I'm going to reshare. And I'm going to share my sound. And hopefully this will come through. So Christine can give me a thumbs up if she can hear it in a second. STEPS is the Science and Technologies for Phosphorus Sustainability Center, a National Science Foundation funded science and technology center.
STEPS values sustainability, engagement, diversity, convergence, and engagement of different stakeholders.
The center consists of students, postdoctoral fellows, faculty, and staff who are dedicated to advancing the sustainability of the phosphorus cycle. Phosphorus is essential for life. It's literally in our DNA. But the way we use phosphorus is unsustainable. And this is where STEPS fits in. STEPS has an ambitious and aspirational vision, and that is in 25 years to reduce human dependence on mined phosphate by 25% and reduce losses of phosphorus to soils and surface waters by 25%, leading to enhanced resilience of the food system and reduced environmental damage.
We need your help to achieve the 25 in 25 vision. Talented, motivated PhD student, undergraduate student, postdoctoral scholar, and senior scientists that will want to collaborate with us to tackle this important challenge.
Be part of this world-changing team. Join us.
So why not to take the next steps? Visit our website to learn and connect with us.
Looks like it went out of PowerPoint mode here. Hopefully you're still seeing the PowerPoint. Connect with us. Why not take the next steps? When Ross said that during the recording, we all got a big chuckle. So it ended up at the end of the video. So we're on Twitter. We're on the web. We also have a lot of communications that go out through the Sustainable Phosphorus Alliance, which is an important partner of ours. And I'll close there. And thank you very much for the opportunity to tell you a little bit more about what Christine and I have in store.
Thank you so much, Jacob. The plan is for us, since we're recording this and many people can't make it, to use this hour as kind of an unveiling and an invitation to future conversations. So if we don't have time to answer all questions, this won't be the last time we can engage. But before I launch into telling how what Jacob just pitched up for us will kind of connect to what we're doing here at App and within RIEEE, does anyone have a question for Jacob they want to ask?
I have one quick question. Thanks for the great presentation. You mentioned in the US, the phosphorus reserves will run out in a generation. Who else has large reserves? So given our traditional extractive natures, who will be fighting for with phosphorus?
Europe does not have large reserves. North Africa, Morocco has the largest reserves in the world. China has large reserves. China recently stopped exporting phosphorus, so everyone's expecting phosphorus fertilizer costs to increase substantially in the coming months and year. In the US, we have mines mostly located in Florida, North Carolina, and then the Northwest, I believe Utah. Maybe I've got that wrong. But there are different opinions on whether or not we're going to run out of phosphorus. There's the opinion that we will, based upon what we know exists. And then there's another opinion that says, well, technology always finds us more things. So we don't base the premise of STEPS upon the source of phosphorus. We base it upon the need to recycle it to prevent phosphorus pollution and to be better stewards of the earth.
That also made me think that it might be interesting to folks to know that the Phosphorus Sustainability Alliance is holding their annual summit in North Carolina next year. Is that right, Jacob? So, and STEPS will be involved with that hosting. So that's another way that you can get involved in kind of the international sustainability cycle for that. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead. Please feel free to chat questions while I'm talking and engage with Jacob that way while we've got him. I'm going to, of course, my screen is all moving around because it likes to do that when you share. Y'all see the main big presentation, right? Okay. All right. So STEPS, then how does that fit with what we're doing here? All right, so it looks like I'm looking away from you because of my monitor system, but I'm going to talk about 5 things today. So I'm going to talk about, STEPS as an opportunity for AppState to shine. Why is it that we are a good fit? And really, I'm just going to tell you what we all told NSF. So that way you'll get to see. And then STEPS is a catalyst for realizing the vision that we've been putting together here at RIEEE in our centers that make us up. And then 3 ways to engage, which is kind of what we came for, kind of the meat of this presentation probably. And then a kernel idea that could be, but doesn't have to orient the way that we move forward as an AppState team. We are a strange bird as far as the STEPS model goes. And when we started saying that, Jacob said, well, I like that bird because we are bringing together, a lot of excellence in the teacher scholar, undergraduate fueled high quality research standpoint. And then we've got a lot of other unique things about us. So first, as I just dive into this, we said, STEPS has a lot to leverage and to help grow here at AppState. One thing is we can do convergence research, and RIEEE is one example of the university investing in that. There are plenty of others as well. We've got great convergent facilities to act as a convergence boundary object, like the phosphorus flow diagram, bring people together around it, including the Blackburn-Vinoy Teaching and Research Farm, and lots of different faculty research and collaborative nature across the domains. We also have a foundational university commitment to sustainability, which I don't have to explain here, but was fun to brag on to the NSF. And this shows up in the mission and the many different parts of the university with sustainability in the name and in the vision. We also have excellence in undergraduate research mentoring and education as part of that. And so this was something that we were able to emphasize as well, that a lot of graduates leave with research experience at the undergraduate level. And it's something that that we really shine in here. Not that that's the only research we do, but it was something that made us a great partner in this particular program. And then we also have pathways of inclusion and workforce development that get at populations that are really important in the phosphorus cycle, including agricultural, rural, where we are kind of rural, being in the mountains, being at headwaters, all of that is important. And then also first generation students. So we are capturing this information, although it's not always something that NSF is on the lookout for in terms of thinking of their demographic diversity goals. It is something that they are going to track throughout our center, and it is broadening access to this and inclusion through our populations. So those are just, you know, a few things that we explained why AppState's a great partner. And talking about how STEPS is so perfect, I think that you know, the range of possibilities comes across very clearly in everything that Jacob told us about, with the variety of scales and disciplines, and, you know, a real tangible problem that we could help move the needle on. But there are ways that it is just uncannily perfect for the things we were already trying to do. So if we, you know, some of you may have seen this in talking about the intersections of RIEEE and the three centers that make us up, which are the Southern Appalachian Environmental Research and Education Center, or SAREC, the Appalachian Energy Center, and SERPA, or the Center for Economic Research and Policy Analysis. And so all of the intersections in between them and separately touch on very important parts of phosphorus sustainability, as I'm sure you can see in what Jacob talked about. And then the sweet spot areas where it's just right up all of our alleys in the intersections, kind of hone in on what is also the core of the integration teamwork and STEPS, which is convergent transdisciplinary scholarship. How do you actually do that without having to know 17 scales in every single discipline? That's not possible. So how do you make a coherent, useful, you know, momentum building approach? And then integration and implementation sciences, drawing on the growing body of evidence. So we ask ourselves as an institute in our centers, what can our convergent research contribute to building a sustainable, equitable future? That's what we're doing with all our research. And then what can we research, practice, and apply at a local specific level that can then be generalized and scaled? And so without going through all this, this is kind of on our intro to RIEEE webinar that you can see. There are these 5 areas that really set us up well to already be working toward the STEPS challenges. And the 4th and 5th are kind of the ones that might be really uniquely suited to these intersectional areas, which are, you know, we focus on applied translational research and on having unique living laboratory capabilities, not only the farm, owning our own utility, but lots of different access to local data sets and a chance to immerse students and faculty in the living laboratory approach. So then there's also this convergent expertise that we really focus on based on the science of team science and the methods that are coming out to help people do that. We've talked about this as well, just what is convergence, and I will not belabor it, but I will say, you know, it's not the answer to every problem, but for a complex, wicked problem, you need to get to the smoothie. You need to blend the efforts. Jacob showed the NSF definition of what blending approaches means to get at different problems. And somehow that got messed up. But the important part of the smoothie is that you need a blender, that's us, and you need a lid on the blender, or else, like I said, it's just it makes a big mess, right? You can't ask every question, you can't know everything. How do you know how to keep a lid on it and where to go next? And one of the ways we do that, and why this overlaps with what RIEEE is focused on anyway, is because we really see the importance of managing the uncertainty and the anxiety, the, you know, emotional, but also intellectual anxiety that comes with a problem that's too big. What size bite do you take and what do you do first, right? So a lot of the different things we're doing within our IEEE to support our working groups and our faculty teams, but also really codifying in STEPS and drawing on the huge range of expertise and the very rare and exciting buy-in of our leadership up to the director level, is that we are focused on methods and creating tools to help with efficiency of interactions, tailoring the depth of convergence, right? Not as some people need to be rigorous in their one discipline, and that's what they need to do to contribute. But how do we patch it all together and weave it into the solution? Managing the burdens of uncertainty, which starts with talking about them. Students bear a lot more anxiety and difficulty in spanning these boundaries and living in this state of emergence that we need to create. And so how do we manage that and not ask too much of them and impede their progress? And then trainee exposure to the decision processes. This is some place that the living lab part of AppState is great at. People need to look under the hood. Why is it hard to keep a river from getting polluted, right? There's a lot of different stakeholders and decision makers that go into that. It's not because of a simplified bad guy out there trying to make the river dirty. It's because there are a lot of processes to manage. So how do we then bring students into that? So those are RIEEE focal points that are also key to STEPS. I should say these are graphics developed for and by STEPS in our site visit as part of using these kind of techniques and priorities. One of the toolkits that we have developed and kind of apply here in RIEEE working groups, but also within STEPS, are centralized tools, like stuff you can go and use and find, like a shared dictionary, a shared language, methods for establishing those. Those are both low lift and pretty new, kind of hot off the presses best practice from team science. And so we're using those, and we can use those in other projects as well. We also focus on individual habits of mind within each team member. So kind of creating these conditions for emergence and transdisciplinarity by having epistemic humility, interdependence, which takes a lot of trust. AppState is a close, tight-knit, great collegial community. We have what is needed to create that interdependence. And then co-creation of knowledge, which means not only with academics, but our non-academic community partners, which we're also well poised to do. So STEPS and AppState, we are able to not only be STEPS funded, as Jacob said, but we're looking at that as a way to kind of nucleate a lot of efforts, because we have more talent and relevant expertise here than we can fund on this grant, which our deputy director, Paul Westerhoff, described as more of a catalyst than a rainmaker. Sounds like a lot of money until you realize how many mouths there are to feed, but it is a fantastic opportunity for us to create this network. So one of the things we want to look at from the very beginning is how can we partner to look for leveraged external grants. There are just a few programs listed here. NSF programs for early career math and sciences. There's a due date of January 7th for that we could be competitive for. Sustainable regional systems, really large programs like that. If we can look for things that would be perfect to hang on the scaffolding of STEPS and grow our expertise, we want to be doing that from day one. And then there are also seed grants at Appalachian under a lot of different names and competition cycles that could also be leveraged to get the ball rolling to go for those external grant programs. And so what we stand to do that we were already trying to do actively across RIEEE and AppState is build broad research momentum in complex socio-environmental challenges and establish our leadership in undergraduate engaged for STEPS, but of course, graduate student engaged as well, convergence research and education, and establish our leadership in the study and practice of integration and team science, which we're also well poised to do. So then 3 ways to engage. I want to make sure we answer these questions, and they're all coming soon. We had the struggle of knowing that we felt really good about STEPS, but we were legally bound to not spread the word far and wide until we were awarded. So finally we get to shout it from the rooftops and invite everybody. What is everybody and what is invite? Right? So there's a couple different parts of these, but what we're going to start, and you can see on our RIEEE YouTube page that we held a couple of weeks ago, a session that we recorded about what is a working group and what is that model that we have launched. So please go back and watch that if you are curious, but we are going to form a RIEEE STEPS working group as a sort of a moving body of parts that can fall into a number of categories. Most of the working groups either already existed in a prior form or are self-assembled by faculty. But since I happen to be the co-PI of this, we're starting it in a kind of an unusual, more top-down method, but we're inviting everybody. And so who's in this working group? People who express interest to contribute, and who's directly STEPS funded. There will be faculty mentors and REU, REF, which is research experience for undergrads, and something that STEPS invented, research experience for farmers, which is undergraduates who intend to go into an agricultural field. So those teams, there'll be 4 pair funded per year. And we by no means are looking at the STEPS working group as limited to those people. We want to definitely include more people. So who else? Research teams that might be funded by leveraged external awards, which might have people in both camps there. And then also research teams funded by collaborative internal seed grants. So people can be in some of these buckets, and we'll explain what it means to participate, but just wanted to make that clear going in. And I'll wrap up this section by talking about how do you express interest and become involved in those groups. Borrowing from the prior working group presentation, just sharing a definition here of what that means. They're intellectual communities sharing an interest in addressing the same complex problem set. So they're not shared methods, they're shared problems that they want to solve, whether that's about the climate. In this case, it's phosphorus sustainability. And so they will work together and generate external funding proposals and really maintain momentum and shared expertise between grant cycles so that we can get momentum. And you'll see how RIEEE can support that in our prior presentation. And how this pertains to STEPS on a practical level is that STEPS will have weekly seminars for the entire center. We rotate through 4 different types of seminars as part of the integration team design. And the idea is that we've promised to do a lot, as Jacob said, and we're asking everybody to solve lots of problems on lots of levels. So we march through all of those obligations to try to manage some of the uncertainty, like I mentioned in our prior section. And so anybody that's in the working group or has a colleague at AppState that is interested, we would love for you to attend the webinar. That is the visiting research seminar speakers. And so we'll make sure that everyone who is expressing interest is invited to those. Then the others are building convergence capacity, STEPS trainee focus where students and postdocs lead, and then non-academic stakeholder integration where we have our project teams vulnerably present their best pitch to people who are non-academic stakeholders and the other team, and take critiques and feedback so that we're always truly doing the co-creation of knowledge. Those are a little more vulnerable, and we're not really, there's no stadium seating. It's only, people playing on the field at those. And so for that, this all STEPS working group members that are actively engaged in directly or leveraged funded STEPS projects. So if you're on the playing field also in there, then definitely welcome to all of those. And I think that's going to be a big place where the network grows. And so this will be available also on our website, but what is the REU REF program? There are 4 REU REF teams, as I said, funded annually. There can be repeats. So it's not that you can only ever do it for 1 year, but we want to be always welcoming in new scholars, new collaborators. So that's the yearly model. And those teams will be an integrated part of STEPS, attend the annual meeting, have opportunities to go to these TBL sites that Jacob talked about, and be part of project teams that are spanning all the themes and cross-cutting teams as well. The students involved can serve and be integrated into the Student Leadership Council and have a variety of roles there. And there will be a number of different ways to integrate, but I think that this is really the exciting vantage point. So somebody who's wanting a national, research career in this direction, this is a pretty cool set of opportunities. And then the third way is to team teach a an Honors College hosted STEPS-led Fall 2022 course. And so this is building, it's called the Research to Action Multidisciplinary Project, or RAMP model. And we're building on a model that we rolled out in the spring of 2021 between the Honors College and RIEEE, and at that time also piloted by the Office of Sustainability. And it is team taught. What we envision is by the REF, REU mentors, but also potentially other working group leaders. The faculty will be paid for this. So that will be part of the group plan. But the idea is that this, and I'll describe a little bit about the model, but there'll be planning staff for the logistics from RIEEE staff, and it's leading convergent education through an integrated research approach. So it's not, it's called a course, but it's really kind of an organized scaffolding for faculty from different arenas to co-lead research and blend together the projects. So Jamie Russell, who's on the call, was one of the leaders, the co-leaders of this course last time, and we're excited to reprise it. It could be a model that we do for the entirety of the life of STEPS, and I think it'll, it's an excellent way. Oh, there you go. Happy mouse wanted to jump ahead. It's an excellent way that we partner with the Honors College. And the Dean of the Honors College, Dr. Jeff Valbush, is always clear to say it's not honors as in elite, it's honors as in, you know, we have the honor of piloting this innovative approach. So students are welcome that are Honors College students, but also not, and departmental honors students as well. And there will also be material that folks can draw on who are team teaching this within the Convergence classroom that Jacob mentioned, and also other materials from the center. So this is based on a model that we piloted at Duke. And it is a really interesting and fun kind of experiment. But the idea is that, you know, decisions come from outcomes, and outcomes of research, right? And there are certain fields that maybe lend themselves more to the quantitative support of those research outcomes. And a lot of times, especially myself included, coming from a STEM background, we really focus on the methods that get us to those scientific quantitative outcomes. And so they deliver modeling experiments, quantitative measurement, to generate alternatives that would then be sort of the things that arrive at the outcomes. So what are the different technologies that we might employ to try to make phosphorus bioavailable, for example? Then, you know, to actually put those alternatives on the table, you don't just need the STEM approaches. We also need kind of the public policy and, you know, the legal and regulatory structures and things that are studied in things like policy, law, economics, which is great that we have that, not only a huge strength at AppState, but an integral part of the STEPS model. Upstream from that, you need values, right? So that having the alternatives doesn't tell you which one you should choose. And maybe the people who are the engineers are not trained in it the way that historians, sociologists, and people who are experts in ethics are. And then, you know, going upstream from that, you know, looking at the whole of humanity. So this is our kind of big pitch for this very interdisciplinary approach that you need to look at the type of integrated wicked problem solving that we're talking about in STEPS. And so basically different disciplines bring different toolboxes and end up with different ultimate decisions. And that's what convergence is. So how do we put that in a classroom setting and make it generate research outputs? It's not so much of a single baton pass in a linear fashion, but like a big mix up all in the same bowl. And so the RAMP model is integrated research organized in a course format. It is not faculty giving knowledge to students that practice it and then the faculty say if they got it right or not. It is moving on from that model to faculties and trainees together working to generate knowledge and then make transdisciplinary research products. And so we have a chance at AppState to pilot what this looks like and teach the world what it can look like. There's a lot of buzzword time going around for convergence, and I think people have legitimate meaning for what it is, but one of the exciting things that STEPS has done is really embraced the opportunity to study this, study ourselves. Like Jacob said, we tend to analyze ourselves and then find out what we learned from it. So I'll move to this and just say, okay, back to how do we do this? So what to do if you want to be interested in the RIEEE STEPS working group is fill out an RIEEE STEPS working group interest form, creatively named to catch the eye. So not Jacob, sorry, he's already done his pinch hitting for today by finding his own link. Grace is going to put the link in the chat. And then also we will follow up when we send this video out to anyone who didn't make it so that they can also fill out the interest form. And what we'll do is find a time to gather and chat more. Also look for an RFP in the couple of coming weeks. And that sounds like it's 3 little letters that sound like a lot of work. It's going to be about 2 pages. What we are really looking for is to evaluate what teams have the biggest potential to make the most of the opportunity and set us on a good course. And they will be awarded by early January, and we'll kick off from there. Kernel idea as a final thing is this. So we've talked to a couple people, but again, we've just been in full transparency balancing the fact that we knew that this was likely, we didn't know what would happen, and we have a small number of directly funded spots, big visions, and very important diversity goals. So it's not been entirely clear what does kicking this off look like. So we're finding that together, and that's part of the working group's job. But in asking ourselves this thing about what can we research, practice, and apply at a local specific level that can be generalized and scaled, Interim College of Arts and Sciences Dean Mike Madrich actually brainstormed this question. What would it look like for the high country to understand and sustainably manage our actual phosphorus flows? So the phosphorus diagram that Jacob shared, if we were to say Watauga County is in, we want to take every single recommendation STEPS has, let's do it. Let's be phosphorus sustainable. How would we do that? Well, maybe we'd want a baseline. And the interlinked expertise that we could gain if we thought about some type of linking question that could bring together these disciplines could not only make a really big impact on moving the needle toward the STEPS 25 and 25 vision, but could also set us up to port these insights to other sustainability problems. And so that could bring in, tech adoption, monitoring practices, sensor development, policy decisions, and community partnerships all in the high country area. This does not have to be the thing that links us, but we would like to use this opportunity to create some infrastructures that support other things and allow us to hang other external funds on this scaffolding. So you've heard us in prior talks mention research infrastructures in a few categories. We could use this to enhance the physical research infrastructures, such as those listed here, that could all easily be seen to fit into the phosphorus sustainability problem. We could build and connect more social infrastructure. So how would we bring people together through Watauga County, Town of Boone, high country agricultural stakeholders? We have an enormous network of rich insight there, and then AppState researchers of all kinds. And then as we do that, how can we build and connect information and data infrastructures? So, surface water data, we are the headwaters to 5 watersheds. That's really incredible. And we have local phosphorus flows we could build up information about and actually do mass balances, economic balances. We've got agricultural data, all of that. And what's really nice about this long runway is that we have time to take risks and to bite off like a pretty big bite. We've got 5 years to chew it, and 10 if we don't mess it up, which I don't think we will, because we have great team and excellent leadership. So those are the kind of things to think about. We only have a few minutes for questions and discussion because we wanted to create a one-stop shop video for onboarding new people. But I do want to welcome any questions. And maybe I'll just stop here and say, for the purpose of recording, say thanks for watching if you did. And thank you, Jacob Jones, for attending. And that's the end.